Okay, how's it going? Okay, we're rolling. Okay, here we are, getting water again. Water. It's not really positioned well. Let's move that a bit. Okay, I'll do. Let's see how the water's looking. Oh, very slow. Okay. You'd think during the rainy season that the water would run fast, but it's a bit of a mystery actually. I suppose because it takes a certain amount of time for the water to recycle through the earth and all that, go up in the sky, come down again. Oh, it's looking clear now. Looking good. Let's clean out the funnel a bit. Okay. Good. Well, I had an idea on, I don't know if I've got good mic placement or not. Maybe that's better. Yeah. Well, the last video I talked about my long ride. I was talking about sort of the comfort and having to leave comfort, and I touched on my long ride. This is maybe the most life-changing thing I ever did. Although it's a little bit hard to say for sure, but could be. Think about all the incredible people I met doing that, both on the ride and the friends that I got to know on the way. Horse people like Chris and Lyle and Heidi and David and Lisa, hoof trimmer, Bob, hoof trimmer, horse worker. Yeah, anyway, pretty great. But, so then I thought, so Brendan mentioned something, and then that gave me an idea on the old YouTube comment. Then that gave me the idea of, hang on a sec, I got things to do. Okay. Right, so that gave me an idea about outdoor equipment. Actually, that's not a perfect place. How about there? Yeah, that'll be better. I was thinking about, see on this, it feels a little bit too shallow for these deep water walks. Dun, 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 dun. The essence of being water from the earth. I think that's a bit of a stretch. Not really, but maybe. Anyway, yeah, so, but I was thinking about, I'll just say my own sort of outdoor equipment journey. When I was young, like really young, like I started doing this in my kind of mid-teens, like 16, that's when I can't remember when my first solo trip was. And I used to go out camping at my grandparents' place a lot when I was much younger, but that's much safer. But anyway, I started doing solo camping quite young. And at the time, and of course I love outdoor equipment, right? Like I love, the first outdoor equipment sort of catalog I ever got was Eastern Mountain Sports. And I just went over it, I just looked over it all the time. And fantasized about the equipment. And I thought it was so cool, all the different kinds of shoes and climbing equipment and all that. Okay, so this, at some point, like when I was young, I used to get the heaviest boots I could find, right? Heavy soles, like mountaineering boots, really. And to be fair, a lot of the literature out there was kind of recommending that, you know? So that kind of went that way for a while. Not too long. At some point, it kind of occurred to me, like, this is silly. It's basically like walking on concrete, like these heavy boots. I'm going to just focus on boots because it's easier to do that, but it really applies to a lot of other things, like tents and knapsacks. Anyway, So then as time went on, I started to wear lighter and lighter footwear. Until by the end, I was just basically wearing moccasins on all my trips, like basically one thin layer of moose hide. You know, for some pretty intense traveling. Like even up in the mountains in Banff, like in Sunshine Meadows, I just walked in moccasins up there. For certain kinds of traveling, it's not really appropriate, right? Like obviously ice climbing and certain kinds of like rock climbing and stuff, but that's a whole different thing. That's a technical kind of activity, right? But for just general beautiful travel, canoeing, hiking, on trails, off trail, moccasins were great. And I started to make my own moccasins when I was quite young, right? I think maybe the first pair I ever made, which were not very good, I might have been in my late teens or so. And right now I'm wearing my rubber boots, but normally, and if you've watched these videos, you'd have known this, normally I wear these sort of leather moccasin-y type boots that I made for here. And I sort of sew on a rubber sole from a pair of rubber boots, because the country here, you could go with just regular leather soles here, but it's so wet. And anyway, practicality is important. Anyway, so the basic idea to me was like, oh, it's this idea of desire to be in nature, but a kind of fear of nature, right? So some people might say, oh, there's nothing to fear in nature. I'm like, well, there is, actually. Do you mean like the idea, like you might hear it occasionally. You don't hear it that much, but no one that lives in the bush or whatever would ever say this. That, oh, nature's just benign and it's just there to help you. You know what I mean? Nothing can hurt you. That's not true at all. But at the same time, it's not all out to get you either, right? It's a little bit more or less neutral. We come from nature, we go back to nature, right? So I'm getting deep again, I don't want that. Anyway, so what's my point? I think I'm trying to say that as humans, maybe there's a struggle between fear of nature and desire to be in it. And love of nature too, right? For sure. And maybe there's a dialogue that goes with that, you know. Certainly for my own self, the more time I spent in nature, the less afraid I got, you know. Like I wasn't terrified. Like I can sleep out at night and not be terrified by every noise, right? And for that, there was a time when I was pretty young. I was in my 20s probably, but I was, what was I doing? I guess I was hiking in Killarney. And Killarney is a park to just southwest of Sudbury, north of Toronto. Like good ways north, like 6 hours maybe, 5 hours. Anyway, beautiful area. But I was there and I was camped out. And by that point I was camping out mostly in open shelters, right? Not in closed tents. And if it wasn't and this would have been probably September, October, so there weren't mosquitoes and stuff around. In bug country, you just can't do that up there. Anyway, in bug time. Anyway, there was this growling sound and a ripping apart of something, and it was a bear ripping apart a tree trunk, like a rotten tree trunk, to eat bugs and things. But that day was it hasn't left me, right? There's this idea, oh, okay. It's like, oh, I was alone, right? Way off in the bush, like days in kind of thing. I was like, okay, well, this might be my last day on Earth. So I just went to sleep. Hope for the best. What else are you going to do, right? You can't call anyone. There weren't any cell phones back then anyway. Not that the cell phones would work there, so whatever. Anyway, so somehow that felt like a bit of a crossing point in terms of fear. So I'm a little bit too rambly here, but this idea of, oh, I'm not afraid, but as time would go on, I would be less afraid of all the possibilities and more aware of all the real possibilities, right? Like traveling alone is risky. It doesn't take a hell of a big injury to do you in, for instance. Like if you break a leg, especially if you're not on a trail, and often I would go off trail and stuff, and like if you break a leg there, you could do it. You could get out. Depends where it is, anyway. But anything even mildly serious could certainly be life-threatening. Anyway, so there's awareness of that, and then traveling alone isn't like you kind of go cautiously, right? There's no extreme. I remember on the third year of my ride, I hiked up to the Trans-Canada Highway just on the edge of Banff. That was like the end point, and then I started going back. And I was by this guest ranch kind of place. Really beautiful, actually. I think they sold it, too bad, but really nice people that ran it. And anyway, I was camped there, and I was trying to figure out a way to go back. And I saw this big hydro cut that was going to an area that I was looking for. And I went, oh, I'm going to go that way. And so there were other horse people there. I said, I think I'm going to go that way tomorrow. So, well, it's not very exciting, he said. And I'm like, look, I don't need to look for exciting on this trip, right? Just a simple day of no excitement was so nice, right? Anyway, it was great. It was great. Perfect. Anyway, what's my point? Like when I get to this point in this kind of talk, I'm like, I might just have to ditch this one. I don't even know what I'm talking about. But it's something I'm trying to connect my thoughts to this dialogue between fear and desire and love of nature. And I can't help but think they're both deeply primal, right? Deeply ancient to us. Like, so if humans have been around in our various guises for 2 million years or whatever it is, and longer probably. Like, so it's probably the case with a lot of other kinds of animals, right? So I went from boots to this wide-ranging kind of concept. Anyway, basically the idea is that I always felt like the less technical you can get with your equipment, the more connected you can be to the nature, right? So anything really technical, even boots are technical, right? We might think of a phone as technical, but everything is, right? So the less separation you can have, the closer it feels. That's my own experience, right? So now there's all kinds of outdoor stuff that has to do with phones and electronics. Like, look at this. I have my little phone here, and that's what I film this on, right? And I've got a microphone. So that's my technology for this sort of thing. But so everything then becomes a compromise, right? So like when I was on my ride, I took a map. I took physical maps, which were really handy, but I also had like a really early version of an iPhone with a kind of GPS-y thing on it. And I use that sometimes. Although things have vastly improved in this short time in terms of that kind of thing. And here, I always take my phone with me. It's not really useful for emergencies unless I'm a little bit close to the village, right? But most of it won't really work. And what I do is I have a GPS map thing called Gaia GPS, and if I go on a trail that I don't know, then I'll mark it on my map, right? But in general, I don't use them for navigation because I already know them, right? So anyway, it's just this compromise, I guess, and hard to know where to draw the line sometimes. Yeah, I'm not sure. What am I trying to... Damn. I don't know what... Oh, shoot, now I'm really blocked. I should have a drink of water. So what's my bloody point? Am I trying to say that I think we use technology to protect us from nature? that deep, deep fear of nature. Even if that technology helps us be in nature. I don't know. Hey, any comments on this? More than welcome, because I'm really a little bit lost. Which is weird because it's something I'm really aware of and think about a lot, right? Like for instance, my own knapsack. Like I've had like crazy ass packs over the years. Like some of them, you know, I was working in film, I had a couple quite expensive packs, right? Let's just tweak this a bit. Okay, yeah. So I had some really high-end, not, you could use them for climbing, but I mean, they had climbing equipment on them, like loops and things, but mostly for hiking. They're great tools, but this is what I use now. So I've shown this pack before. So this is kind of it is a pack basket. It's black ash. It's from the States, but it's very similar to what would have been used in all the shield country in Canada, right? And black ash was a great material because you could soak the log. What you do is you soak a log of black ash in water for like a month or something. And then you take big sledgehammers and smash it, and it peels off into these strips, right? Then you make a great backpack. And it's specifically for canoeing, actually. And I've got a tump line that this here, where are we now? That there's a tump line, and the canvas sort of thing around it, that was there, but I made my own, shoulder straps and all that. I built that myself because what came with it wasn't that great. Yeah, so that's what I use now, and I've been using this pack for, Jesus, I've probably had this 20-25 years, right? And to be honest, it's, well, obviously I think it's the best thing because I just never stop using it. It's great, it's light, strong. I mean, 25 years, eh? It looks like I just bought it. Very sturdy, very strong, repairable, right? Here, if I was here and something broke, I could get a piece of bamboo and do for at least a temporary repair. It's nice because it stands up, right? So when you're packing and unpacking, it stands up. The only thing is it's not waterproof, as it is, right? I mean, Novak is really waterproof in the end. But you can get a cover. So with this, what I'll do is I'll put just a cover over if it's raining. But I really never go out with it in real rain here. Like when I go camping here, it would usually normally be in the drier time of year, right? Sometimes I go up on the ridge, just up there, and go camping. Maybe up to Qfin, beautiful. Yeah. Anyway, so I could just cover it with a tarp or something. Or alternatively, I could just pack everything in it and wrap that with something waterproof. And that works well too, because the wood can get wet. Fine. And then here I can carry an umbrella, right? A lot of people, it's a good way to go here actually, unless you're in really thick bush, because it's so hot, right? That heavy raincoats are tricky. Right, so that's what I use now for my pack, and I just have been dragging it along with me for years. You know what, I'm going to stop now and start walking. Maybe a clearer idea of this will come forth. Oh, wow, it's such a beautiful day today. Oh. We had quite a bit of rain there for a while. As Gung said, a big monsoon storm came through, and it rained steadily for days, And it rained a lot last night, but now it feels a bit more like normal, right? Some nice sun, rain showers for a few hours maybe at some point. It's nice when it happens at night though, and some sun, and so beautiful. I just thought of something. One thing that sort of makes me chuckle is, let's see now, like if you watch, great thing to do here if you're like to be in a place is to see what the local people are doing. like in clothes, in terms of their clothes and stuff. Like a lot of people I see here wear like kind of like short, like rubber boot type shoes almost. Like the fellow I met on my last hike, he was wearing like rubber shoes, basically like moccasins made out of rubber. Turning very lightweight, very flexible. Can feel the earth. Let me jump to the side a bit here. So like when you wear moccasins in the ground, you can feel the ground. So you can feel the ground beneath you, and it adds a huge level of sensory information, I guess you could say. Like huge, right? Can feel everything that's like I'm wearing these rubber boots, right? They're basically like very thin-soled, no heel, right? And I can feel everything under my feet. I can feel tiny stones. Do you know what I mean? So what ends up happening is, like when you're walking in the woods, right? Of course, it's more than your eyes, right? Your eyes are important, of course, but also what you hear is super important, right? Really, I mean, if I want to put a triage to it, I say eyesight is probably the most useful, but hearing is way up there, right? For sure. And in Banff, I used to see people like running on some of the wider trails with headphones on, jogging through bear country. Despite my mostly trying to mind my own business, I would stop and say, "Look, don't do that. You're gonna run headlong into a bear or an elk, and that'll be you done." Anyway, why would you hike in? I mean, it's such incredible country. Well, anyway, I mean, why would you run with headphones? Anyway, whatever. But so I guess I was talking about? Oh shoot, what was I? Hearing. Right. So it's important to hear because you get a lot of information from that, right? Like for sure, you can hear a cracking branch and look up and figure out where it's coming from, right? If you're not paying attention, that's vital. You can also hear animals around you, people. You know, it's sort of obvious, I guess. And smell. Like there's lots of times when I'm going around and going, "Nope, something's dead here," right? Okay, so something's dead, that's one thing, right? Something's dead, but in the wilderness, the chance of there being something dead and another animal eating it is fairly high, right? So if you smell a carcass, you kind of want to get yourself on a bit of an alert level, you know, just awareness level, right? Okay, so there's all these senses, and the one, and the physical foot on the ground information is also super vital, I think, both for just getting around, you know. Here, let's switch this. Like getting through the trails, I can feel where things might be slippery, and I mean, it takes a certain kind of, takes a little time to walk this way, right? Walk this way. Like you can't just go from, in my experience, it's probably a bad idea to go from sort of heavy duty mountain boots to moccasins, right? You have to build up strength, but not just strength. You have to build up a certain kind of way of walking, right? Boy, you can really walk silently in a pair of moccasins, I'll tell you. But, okay, so that's the practical level, right? But I think also like wearing a pair of soft-soled moccasin type footwear, well, on the more like, just the experiential beauty of nature, it also adds to it, right? It adds to the whole experience. Connecting with nature. It's so beautiful. So beautiful. Right. You know, I think a lot about, well, there's that, oops, ouch. Go, ouch. Go with thin soles, ouch. You know, where I live here in Mekampong, like, there's that tank again, they haven't fixed it up yet. One thing that happens here in Mekampong, right, gets a lot of visitors. It's really the same as Banff, actually. It's really the same. It's a bit of a tourist town now, right? Mostly Thai tourists, but not just. You see some people from China and some people from Europe, or of European extract, you might say. Europeans, Americans, not a lot of Canadians, because there's not a lot of Canadians, but some. I've met a couple. And they come up because part of it is because it's beautiful nature. I mean, it's cooler here, so that's nice, right? But they come because it's so beautiful. But they never come on these trails. Ever. There's some local people. I've mentioned this before, but I've never seen like a tourist just hiking here. I mean, they haven't really set it up for hiking. Right? It's not, there's lots of trails, but there's nothing, they're not hiking trails, they're not marked and stuff, right? So you'd need a guide, but that's good anyway. People should have a guide when they come here in general, I'd say, even though I never do that. But don't do as I say, not as I do. Don't come up in the mountains alone. Ever. Anyway, yeah, so to me that's a really nice analogy, I guess you could say, how people want to be in nature but are also afraid to go too far into it. You know? Same thing in Banff. How many people were in Banff a year? A couple million maybe. Who knows? A town of 6,000 had a couple million visitors every year. I mean, but it's sort of set up as a tourist town. But anyway, in Banff, people do go hiking, and they have hiking trails, but at the same time, I would say it's a relatively small minority of people that would venture off from the main spots, right? The main tourist spots, the main sort of lookouts, and they're all beautiful and stuff. I'm not putting it down or anything, but that's just the reality, right? So people want to be in nature, but not too much, as it turns out. I'm just kind of repeating myself now. The dialogue between fear and love of the wild. Desire to be in it, but fear of being too much in it. What is it? Someone, please. Brendan, Sucheng, Marty. I think you said you watched these. Who else? There's other people. I'd love it if people could chime in on this. Really, please, if you have a thought, please don't be afraid to speak it out. Because somehow I think it's important, right? Somehow I can't help but think the mass of the dialogue around climate change, environmental destruction, ecological collapse is twisted in with this, and not necessarily in the best way, right? So the classic is, we need to get more renewable energy, more windmills and solar panels. It's like, really? That's what you think is the main thing that needs doing? I mean, the people thinking that it's starting to diminish, right? Because like 20 years ago, well, I recycle. I'm doing my part. It's like, we all know now that that's not a part. Well, it's a part, but it's not helping any really much. Especially because they all end up in Indonesia and Thailand and Malaysia. And now those countries are all saying, screw you, we're going to send it back to you. So Canada and the US and all these Western countries are getting all their garbage sent back to them, which I think is really good, right? Anyway, yeah, so I sort of can't help but think this is twisted in with this dialogue. Then it gets twisted in with manipulation of, it's so complex. My head's starting to spin with the thought of it, right? So complex, like twisted in with control of nature. Are we natural beings even at this late stage, you know? Jesus, it's just anyway, there you go. No answers today, or ever, really. Do I ever say answers? Okay, here's my answer, right? This is my recommendation for solving the ecological crisis. Mostly walk, mostly wear shoes that have really thin soles, or barefoot. Great too. Like, I don't go barefoot here. I mean, it's just a bit too much. I mean, I go barefoot at home, and even on the grounds around me. Like, I do my kata practice barefoot on the ground and stuff. But I wouldn't hike in the mountains barefoot. I'm sure some can and do. But anyway, yeah. So wear thin-soled shoes. Go hiking in the woods, and mostly walk if you can do it. It's not that easy for most people, eh? If you live in a city, you can go to a city park. It's not quite the same thing, but I don't know. I guess you can just do what you can do, right? Anyway, I don't know how long this is going to be. This is so rambly. Anyway, I'll probably put it up because in a way I don't really care how I look and sound, but if anyone has some great wisdom, pearls of wisdom to impart here, I'd be more than happy to read them, listen to them, etc., etc. Okay, so time to go home. I got French polishing to do. I've been repairing my kendo do, which is the part that protects your middle, and it looks really beautiful. Yeah, okay. Ciao. À la prochaine, and take care, everyone. Ciao. Again, hey, I thought while I'm here, I'd show you. I mentioned my do for kendo. So I thought maybe I'll show you that. So this is a do, kendo do. It's what we wear. Protects our stomach here and our chest here. And it's really beautiful. So mine is made with bamboo, which is not so common anymore. You can get them, of course, but they're a bit more expensive. Anyway, I've had mine for, I don't know, 25 or 30 years, maybe? I don't even know how long. Anyway, but what I did, and flip it around, is it was always a little bit too narrow. And I guess I've widened out a bit, but not too much. Like, my hip bones are still the same, but of course. But what I did was the bamboo was lacquered red, right? So what I did I wanted to expand it maybe, I don't know, an inch maybe. So what I did was I just spread it apart with a piece of bamboo, and then filled in. I'd stripped all the red off, right? Basically scraped it, and then filled in some gaps here that showed up. Filled those up with some veneer, really, and then glued that in. And then what I did was I took low viscosity crazy glue and went along the seams and then sanded it. Something I do with guitars a lot, a way to fill space, you know. So that glue and the powdered bamboo then filled it out a bit. So now the width is perfect. But I also love that it's now, I've just got it back to this natural bamboo, and I just shellac that. Normally you do use urushi, a kind of lacquer they use, which this black here is urushi, really great stuff, but I don't have urushi, so I used shellac, and that'll be fine. That'll work just fine. Not quite as durable, but who cares, because I have lots of shellac to touch it up if I need to. Anyway, so that's what it is now. Looks good, eh? So it's been shellacking all week. Now I'm gonna work on, got a couple guitars that I'm working on. What are we working on? That one, oops, where are we? That one there, and this one here are the two that I'm working on now. Okay, so thanks again for checking in, and hope everyone's doing great.